the impact.
Living in a memory.
Okay, so we've talked about all that. So talk to us about what they're doing to replace this dollar, this entire global system. What are they trying to do? And probably my next thought, where is that going and why? Because here's the thing, if you're watching this show today, we're going to take all of this because everything Britt just said is like, it's like a master class. Okay. I mean, really it is. Okay. So we're going to take these concepts that Britt just talked about, the international, what's going on internationally. We're going to talk about the replacement of what's here now with what's going on. Then we're going to talk about where it's going. But then I want to break it down to everybody's everyday life, because a lot of people, I honestly think, Kev, a lot of people, Britt, I'm guessing
a lot of people are clueless.
They're clueless. They just go and they know, groceries are a little higher. They know their money's not going any further. But let's be honest, they're clueless as to what is truly happening. And I think a lot of people don't even want to know.
Well, exactly what I was about to say. They're happily being sheep, right? Because they don't want to. They don't want to know, right? Anything bad, they just cover their eyes, right? It won't. The boogeyman won't get them, But when everyone should be preparing, doing the proper research, reading books like yours, and getting themselves informed. So then when something does happen, they know how to adapt and overcome the best we can for our families.
Yeah, because Britt, you just recently talked about having some supplies for a few weeks because of what could be coming, and you believe something's coming, a bank shutdown. We'll get into that in a little bit. Let's talk about what we already know is coming. Let's just get it out there. CBDCs, what are they? Why are they? What are they designed to do? And I've heard you say this system is designed to trap you. That's a lot to unpack, but can you kind of work through that with us?
So central bank CBDCs are central bank digital currencies. So it's a digital token. Think of cryptocurrencies. Most people are familiar with that, but issued by the central bank. So in the United States, that would be the Federal Reserve, and Japan, it would be the Bank of Japan. Each nation would be issuing its own central bank digital currency, and 95% of the world's population lives in a nation where they either are studying this or actually have one being used right now. And if anybody wants to get an idea of what it means for them in their life, just get on TikTok or YouTube and look up social credit scores in China. And you'll find that people have to scan their phones in order to buy something from a vending machine. And if their social credit score isn't high enough, in other words, that they haven't engaged in the behavior that the government wants them to engage in, that vending machine will not work for them. That taxi door will not open. In some cases, their apartment door won't open. And so they can control every aspect of your life if they control your use of your money, the way you're able to buy and sell things. And so central
that sounds like something I've heard in the Bible, though.
It is. I say it's indistinct. It's not the mark of the beast, which we read about in Revelation chapter 13.
Yep, not yet.
But I believe it's setting the stage for it. It's building that foundation, that infrastructure for it, because from the economic standpoint, it's indistinguishable in function from the mark of the beast. With central bank digital currencies, you're able to shut off somebody's ability to buy or sell, to use that currency. And it's actually programmable, which means, so for instance, right now you might say, well, I have a credit card, and they could shut that down. But imagine you have these central bank digital currencies, and let's say you put a video up that they don't like. And instead of giving you a strike or a warning, right, they go, well, your central bank digital currency only works within 2 miles of your home. Or, you can't buy plane tickets. You can't, whatever it may be. They could still make it so you could use it,
Shut
but you
down
could
the
only use
centers.
it in certain places, or you could only use it to buy certain things.
Yeah.
And it gives complete surveillance, complete insight into everything you're doing to the government, because they would have complete control over that. Whereas if you use cash now, that gives you some level of privacy, but they're also pushing to get rid of that. If you've noticed, they put limits on how much cash you can deposit, how much you can withdraw at a specific time. And with inflation, that's really becoming less and less, even if the levels stay the same.
Didn't I hear in Australia they are either going to soon make it to where there are no more cash deposits or withdrawals, if I heard right?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. So one of the largest banks in Australia said by the end of this year, they will no longer engage in any sort of cash transactions at all. You won't be able to deposit cash. You won't be able to withdraw it. And they asked the other banks, and this is one thing you'll notice in the media, if you know how to read their stories and you know how to understand how these PR people work. So they said, well, we have no intent to do the same thing. We're not intending to do the same thing. They don't say, there's no way we would do that. That's outrageous. They just say, at this moment, we don't have any plans to do that.
But maybe tomorrow we
again in 2 months, and we'll have to do that.
We've been forced to.
Yeah. But we know Australia itself has legislation, it's law now, I believe, by the year 2030, they're to do away with all checks and all cash transactions within their banking system. So they may not have plans to do it now, right? But they have plans to do it in 6 years, right? So it's all, they like to play these verbal gymnastics and try to convince people everything's going to be all right. But this is where they're pushing everybody because they want to have that control.
Yeah.
You mentioned being trapped. If you, once you're in this system, there's no way out. Because think about if you say, well, I'm going to use cash. So what if I don't have a bank? I'm going to hoard cash and trade that. Well, what business are you going to transact with? Because they also have to agree that they're only going to use cash, because if their bank won't accept the deposit of cash, then they would have to be willing to have that cash, have people know that they have that cash and that it can be stolen from them. That it creates all sorts of issues. So a lot of businesses will just say it's a lot easier to just go all electronic, go cashless, and then that forces the holdouts, if they want to participate in the system, to do that. And then, in Europe, they said the same thing. The head of the ECB there, and they said, well, we have these, that there's like $1,000 limit on what you can cash that you can take out or put in, and it will be strictly enforced. And don't worry about central bank digital currency. We're not going to. It's not going to be programmable in any way, right? See, what are you worried about? We had no plans to make it programmable, and that may be true when they roll it out. And then a year later, once everybody's walked into the trap, they shut the door, close, they make it programmable, and at that
they're
point,
pretty much going to have
out.
to, aren't they? Going to have to, Britt, because isn't part of the reason they're saying they're going to this is to avoid financial scams and things like that, so it's for your protection.
Cloak it in good.
Just like the whole vaccine, everything is for your protection, right? This is for your safety. We're doing this for your good. But in the meantime, you're going to find yourself trapped. And I heard you talk about, you believed at some point when they bring in this central bank digital currency, that they're going to offer X amount of dollars for you to, they're going to give you however many CBDCs, to buy into the program and, and convert your cash or convert your account. And, and those, and if you don't do it, they'll probably build that to, oh, maybe we'll give you 20,000 or 30,000. And then eventually they're going to go, it's done. And you're going to be out if you're not in. At least you're not going to get that money.
They understand very clearly that incentives impact people's behavior. So think about the last 3 years, there was something that they wanted us to do. And if you remember clearly, the mayor of New York was eating a cheeseburger and fries and going, it's delicious.
Oh, Britt, I'm not doing that for a
yours.
cheeseburger, man.
Yeah, I remember that. That was
it better
so
be a
they'll offer
double
things
whopper,
like
dude.
rewards. They'll offer things like rewards,
Right.
and then they'll also have the punishments if you don't comply. Yeah. So that creates an incentive structure where, unless you have a really, you're ready to stand tall, yeah, and you're saying this is not going to happen, I'm not going to participate in this, you're going to walk right into that because it's the easy path, and most people take the easy way.
All the sheep are like, burger.
Yeah, exactly.
Just walk right into it. Yeah.
So let's be clear. CBDCs, for those of you who are Christians who watch this, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube, guys, that I would tell you, a lot of prophecy guys, I would tell guys, stay away from. I mean, there are a few guys, Britt, there's Tom Hughes, there's Brandon Holdhouse, Billy Crone, Andy Woods, those guys, Pete Garcia, the kind of common criminals, as I call you guys, that love all of you, trust me. But there are people that are out there saying such ridiculous and fantastical things that there are Christians out there that are truly thinking this is the mark of the beast, or they were thinking this thing could be the mark of the beast because people were saying it, right? And I was like, man, this is bad. We're not saying this is the mark of the beast. So if this system comes around in our lifetime before Jesus comes back, then it's not the mark of the beast. Because the mark of the beast is not coming till after the rapture. Right now, we are saying we believe this is the infrastructure, the setup exactly of all of that system, but it's not it yet.
Maybe an implantable chip or
all of that stuff. We believe all of that stuff's coming. But I mean, would you agree with that, Britt?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Tom Hughes, and Tom had a saying where he pointed out the mark of the beast requires a beast, meaning the Antichrist has to be present to roll it out. There's no Antichrist here. That's something that occurs at the midpoint of the 7-year tribulation. We're not there. As you said, the rapture of the church will occur before that. I believe that's what the Bible teaches.
Yeah.
So I don't expect that Bible-believing Christians would be around for that, but you can't expect that would just appear out of nowhere.
Right.
So we're seeing the infrastructure being put in place. And if you take this in and of itself, it's interesting. But when you combine it with all of the other signs, because Jesus and the prophets pointed to a number of signs that they said would mark this time period, the tribulation period, the period before the second coming of Jesus to the earth to establish his kingdom. And I point out for 95% of Christian history, or pretty close to it, none of those signs were present unless they were simple general signs.
That's amazing.
But now we see almost all of them either fulfilled or in some phase of fulfillment. So for instance,
ramping up.
Yeah. Right.
So really, and Kev just said it. It's birth pangs. It's ramping. Right. It's the ramping up. Tell us about how, let's tie some of this stuff together where we are in biblical prophecy, the CBDCs, the banks, all of this stuff, because I love the way you and Tom and guys like that are able to tie all this together. But you're about the only one I know that really is able to take the financial system and really kind of tie that in. So tie all of that in if you can. I mean, not that the job's not big enough already, but let's unpack that, because you're talking about the signs. 95% of them have not been there until the last whatever years. Let's kind of go there and unpack that a little bit. What signs are we talking about? How is this financial thing fitting in with this, and then with the collapse, and then the CBDCs, which is going to lead to a one world government,
one world currency,
and a one world currency. And all of this stuff is happening now. Tell us where you see all of this stuff at, how it's collapsing into this, and where are we going?
Sure. Well, it is an example of some of the signs. So, for instance, the Old Testament prophets talked about the nation of Israel being brought back into the land of Israel from where they were scattered, that they would be in exile. Jesus said the temple would be destroyed, the Jewish people carted off to serve as slaves, and then Jerusalem would be trampled by the Gentiles, meaning non-Jewish people, until those times come to an end. And he was talking about that specifically in regard to his second coming. And so we've seen the fulfillment of really both of those prophecies to a large degree. And the nation of Israel gathered back into the land after being exiled in all the nations for centuries. Think about the miracle that is, that you have people who didn't assimilate to all of these lands where they were scattered and were brought back just as the Bible said they would be, and then back into control of Jerusalem following the 1967 Six-Day War.
Yeah.
So what we're waiting for next is control of the Temple Mount, because it's foretold that there would be there has to be a temple for the Antichrist to desecrate. So we would expect that to happen in the near future. But we see things like that people take for granted, like the gospel will be spread all over the world. And we think about that and think, well, that's been happening because it's been happening our whole lifetime.
Right.
But think about when Jesus said this, he's a carpenter with a handful of fishermen followers on the outskirts of the Roman Empire. He's not a king. He's not this major figure, but he says, my message will be spread to the whole world. And we've seen that happen. And for centuries, it was pretty much stayed in that general area around the Mediterranean. And it's only in the last 200 to 300 years that we've seen this explosion of missionaries to all parts of the world. So that's a sign that we see. We see some of these signs in technology. We talked about the mark of the beast and how in the past that would have required a supernatural fulfillment. But now we're seeing technologies put in place where that doesn't have to be fulfilled supernaturally. The same if you read Revelation chapter 11, it talks about 2 witnesses of God that are killed and their bodies are left in the streets of Jerusalem, and the whole world views their bodies for 3 days. So that's impossible outside of the supernatural for the entire world to walk down this one street in one city in the world.
Yeah.
Even when that was written, much less today when you've got billions of people around the globe. But with technology, we see how people could view that happening in real time on phones in their palms or whatever technology.
I was going to say, exactly. Yeah.
Right. And even some of the poorest people in the world still have mobile phones. So they're everywhere. And we're only going to see that become more commonplace as time goes by. And again, who knows what new technology is coming a year or 2 years or 3 years down the road. So we can see all of these signs coming together. Jesus said, when you see all these things begin to happen, know that I'm near. I'm right at the door. Look up, your salvation draws near. So we can't know the day or the hour of the Lord's return, but we can know this general time frame based on the signs that Jesus and the prophets gave us. Again, we see those signs in our generation. Previous generations, over 90% of Christian history, they could not point to any of these signs that we just talked about. But now we can point to all of these signs. So that tells us, that indicates the time frame we're living in. So now we talk about central bank digital currencies and how this really is indistinguishable in function from the mark of the beast. And so that we know that the mark of the beast is coming, and we know that we see these technologies here. How do we get from where we are now to where this technology, getting people to adopt central bank digital currencies? And I think that that's the plan of the people in power, people running the banks. Not everybody understands this. There could be bank presidents that just bank presidents and they have no ill intent. But there are people who very much understand that the current monetary system's coming to an end. Your average monetary system lasts about 40 years. And what did we say we're going into year 53 of this, I guess, petrodollar. We've seen it starting to come apart. So what replaces that? My guess is we're going to have a financial collapse as a result of the end of this system. And they're going to want to implement this new system. Now, when I talk about a financial collapse, that doesn't mean, riots in the streets, every man for himself. You're living off the land. Because you could have all of the banks in the world wiped out, but it's not going to destroy the house you're living in or the farm down the street or any of the real things in the world, but it's going to bankrupt a lot of people. It's going to cause similar to what we saw in the Great Depression. And so when they know that's coming to an end, they're thinking, well, how do we move to the next system and retain our power? And that's when these central bank digital currencies come in.
The impact.